Hello, I'm Dr. Sam, this is Dr. Sam's Health, and we're continuing my diet review series. Today I would like to talk about the Western diet again, but unlike the previous time when we were talking about just the general aspects of this diet, maybe its history, I would like to focus on the most problematic issues with this diet, specifically on top 5 issues. And I don't want to be just somebody who criticizes things for no reason. I want to provide not only the critique, but also some sort of a solution to each of these issues. So let us problem solve or troubleshoot the Western diet today. And since it's a top 5, we'll start with issue number 5, which is the introduction of unnatural nutrients or products into our diet, such as sweeteners, preservatives, MSG, industrial trans fats, and so on. This list is actually quite long. There are literally thousands of different chemicals that are introduced into our diet to make our food more palatable, more desirable, to increase its shelf life, and ultimately to make its production more profitable. And as the science shows, many of these products are detrimental to our health. Some of them are cancerogenic, some of them are changing our metabolism in an unhealthy way, some of them are simply associated with multiple health conditions such as obesity, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, and so on and so on and so on, without any apparent reason. We just know that there is an association between certain foods or certain food categories and health problems. I don't want to vilify the food industry, but if we take a closer look at what we're eating, we'll realize that on a daily basis we're making lots of unhealthy food choices. Effectively, we're not even making these choices because the proper food information, the nutritional data, is usually hidden in a small print on the back of the package of whatever we are buying in a supermarket, and accordingly we don't even have a chance to make a proper nutritional choice, which essentially is the solution for this issue, being more food and nutrition conscious. And I'm not saying that everybody should go like fully organic, because for some people it's almost impossible to do, or at least not feasible. It's too expensive, or this kind of foods are not available. But at least we can try to read the food labels, try to eliminate and not to consume things that are detrimental to our health. We don't need pop, we don't need highly processed foods, we don't need sweeteners, we don't need things like that. I think that the optimal solution would be to try to stick to the foods that our ancestors would be eating around this time of the year. And effectively, I'm talking about some sort of a Paleolithic nutrition or paleo diet. This is a huge topic, and I will definitely make a video about the paleo diet and the Paleolithic nutrition in one of my future videos. But today I would like to focus just on the issues and potential solutions to them. And paleo diet seems to be a good solution for at least 2 or 3 of these main issues. So let's get to the next one. Issue number 4 is consumption of foods that we can process, that we used to consume at certain point of our development or at certain point in our evolution as a species, but at the same time we are not used to consuming such large quantities and throughout our lifespan. The good examples would be consumption of milk, consumption of different fermented foods, like cheese, for example, or a good example would be alcohol or bread. Let's talk about milk first. As babies, we're meant to consume our mother's milk. It's a part of our developmental cycle, but at the same time, Mother Nature did not expect us to consume milk throughout our lifespan, let alone the milk of other species. In fact, lots of people are losing their ability to process milk by a certain age. And on top of that, lots of dairy products are fermented foods and they are highly calorific, meaning that, for example, cheese has lots of calories in it, and if we consume lots of cheese, it's very, very easy for us to kind of overshoot our daily caloric intake norm. Another semi-natural food category here is bread, and it's closely related to dairy products because in order to make bread we need to use some milk. Of course, our ancestors had access to some grains, but even 20-30,000 years ago, they would never think about grinding it, adding some yeast to it, let it be fermented by yeast, and then baking it. And I bet they never had a problem with gluten intolerance. Okay, another category here is alcohol. Alcohol is a good example of highly fermented foods, and I think that as a species we definitely were exposed to certain alcohols throughout our history. In fact, our body produces small amounts of alcohol as a byproduct of certain chemical reactions. But at the same time, we're never meant to consume large quantities of alcohol. And As far as we know, alcohol is related to approximately 80 different health conditions. Many of them are cancers, and alcohol consumption is overall detrimental. And since I've got a lot of research published on the relationship between alcohol and different health states, I must be fair, and I must say that alcohol is not 100% bad. There is a dose-response relationship, and people who are consuming small quantities of alcohol on a daily basis are usually benefiting a little bit from it. We are talking about the relationship between small quantities of alcohol consumed on a daily basis and heart disease, cardiovascular disease in general, atherosclerosis, conditions like that. But again, to be very fair, I think it's a slippery slope, and even like say 1 drink a day, which is considered to be almost beneficial for our metabolism, 1 drink a day can lead to increased risk of certain cancers, and the beneficial effects of small quantities of alcohol consumed on a regular basis, they can be achieved by doing simple things like working out or having overall healthy lifestyle. So in the end of the day, I don't want anyone to watch this video and say Dr. Sam told you that drinking is a good thing. It has lots of detrimental effects. Small quantities of alcohol can have some beneficial effects, but these beneficial effects can be achieved otherwise. So the solution to issue number 4 is limiting or completely eliminating the consumption of these foods: milk, bread, alcohol, in general, fermented and processed foods. As I'm saying this, actually I've got a mental image of like a charcuterie board or a cheese plate with a perfectly paired bottle of wine, but I must say that we know from all kinds of research that this kind of foods are not particularly good for you, and my suggestion is to minimize consumption of these foods or to eliminate them completely. And again, this brings us to the idea of some sort of an ancestral type of eating, some sort of a version of a paleo diet, which again I will talk about in my future videos. Okay, issue number 3 is consumption of large quantities of carbohydrates. This one is huge. Actually, my whole journey of diet reviews started with the book of Dr. Atkins, New Diet Revolution, and that was the moment when I started thinking about our approaches to nutrition, the science behind that, and started to question the medical knowledge that I was getting in my medical school. But even given that, I wouldn't put this problem on my top 1 place. So let's talk about carbohydrates for a second. The first thing I would like to say about carbohydrates is that we can definitely process them and process them really, really well. Actually, a lot of people would argue that consumption of right amounts of right carbohydrates can be very beneficial for cognitive performance, for athletic performance, and so on. So what is the problem? The problem is that we are consuming wrong carbohydrates. We're consuming way too much refined carbohydrates like pure glucose, pure fructose, and at the same time we're consuming much more of them than we should, and we're consuming them 24/7. Effectively, we are not timing our carbohydrate intake with our athletic or cognitive events. Essentially, we are not reaping the benefits of consumption of bolus amounts of carbohydrates, and what we're doing is we are causing some spikes of insulin, which result in insulin resistance. Also, the job of insulin is converting these carbohydrates, actually processing the carbohydrates in general, glucose specifically, but one of the things that insulin does to carbohydrates, to glucose in our bloodstream, is dumping it into tissues and making them converted into fat. So effectively, chronic uncontrollable consumption of large quantities of refined sugars leads to insulin resistance and obesity and all health issues associated with these 2 conditions. Solution? Quite obviously, low carbohydrate eating. And again, I don't want to vilify carbs. We can get a lot of benefits from them, but I do think that restricting the amount of carbohydrates that we consume could be a solution to many health issues that our society is suffering from. And definitely there will be several videos in this series on low carbohydrate eating, ketogenic diets, issues associated with them, their effectiveness, and so on. Okay, the next issue is high food availability and high cost effectiveness of food. Effectively, our ancestors had to hunt for their food, or since agricultural revolution they had to work hard to get certain amount of nutrients on a daily basis. What we have right now is the abundance of foods that are available effectively 24/7. They don't cost much to us. For a fraction of our budget, we can get lots of nutrients, we can get lots of calories, we can get all kinds of foods that we would naturally eat in certain seasons, but we can get them all year round. Say we can get watermelons in Toronto at any point of time, 24/7 on any given day of the year. So I don't think that our ancestors actually had access to all kinds of nutrients all the time. And that is a huge problem. Again, this kind of uncontrollable consumption of multiple nutrients in unrestricted fashion can lead to multiple health issues. And I see at least two solutions here. First of all, we can again try to stick to our ancestral nutritional patterns. Again, we're talking about the paleo diet, but also we can try to restrict our eating patterns to certain feeding windows and having some fasting periods, which is supposed to be very helpful with multiple health issues to begin with. So we're talking about intermittent fasting protocols. And of course, there will be at least 1 or 2 videos dedicated to intermittent fasting in this series. And now it's time to talk about the main issue, which is the incredible caloric surplus. We're not only eating way too many different nutrients, we're not only eating them 24/7 and in an uncontrollable fashion, but the end result is consumption of huge amounts of energy. I have been studying diets and nutrition for a long time. It's been almost 2 decades. And my main conclusion is that we do not see the forest behind the trees. We are so focused on specific micronutrients or macronutrients or food timing that we kind of lost sight of the fact that we are consuming too many calories. And I know for sure that at this point somebody watching this video will say, you know, I actually have been doing intermittent fasting for several months and it worked miracles for me. Or somebody will say that I've got a friend who was following ketogenic diet, they don't care about the total nutrient intake, they consume lots of fat and they still lose weight and feeling much better than they used to. And I will tell you that with all honesty, all these people who are benefiting from these different diets that do not imply caloric restriction are effectively in a caloric restriction state. You can trace it back to their nutrition logs, you can trace it back to research studies, clinical trials of different diets. You can take a look at their average nutritional intake and you will see that unless there is some sort of a caloric restriction, there is no or very blunted responses to dietary interventions. I know it's a very bold statement and a lot of you will disagree with me, but I can back this statement with science. And quite frankly, I anticipate that over the course of multiple videos in this video series, I will be able to show that all these diets, with all their merits, are only effective for weight loss if there is some sort of a caloric restriction in place. And here I would like to pause and say one important thing. I'm not denying that all these diets have additional benefits, additional to weight loss, but I do believe that the main issue with the Western diet is the fact that we're consuming too many calories. Our calories in is much higher than calories out. And accordingly, the main benefit from all kinds of diet is due to the fact they introduce caloric restriction. So that was definitely the main point of my today's video, but also we touched on different issues and different solutions. And when talking about them, I mentioned certain diets like low carbohydrate diets, ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting, paleo diet, and so on. And definitely all these diets, they have certain merits, and I would like to talk about them in my future videos, which is the whole point of this diet review series. So our discussion is definitely to be continued, and I will be working on these videos in the next several months. If you don't want to miss a thing, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the like button if you like my videos. If you have any questions, suggestions, concerns, if you would like to argue with me about anything I'm saying, please, you're welcome to leave comments. Also, you can check my website, drsamshealth.com. I've got some text materials for you there if you prefer reading things rather than listening to me. And that's it for today. I wish you all the best. See you in my next video.